morning, everyone, and good evening and good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from on this delightful day, whether it be Tuesday evening for you or Wednesday morning for you or other climes. It's great to have you along, and as always, we are looking forward to a really good interactive session. For those of you that don't yet know, I'm Collins Rex, and I represent the Global Trade Professionals Alliance in these webinars. And I'd also like to acknowledge our partners in this series, the University of Adelaide and the Poole College of Management. Now, today we're delighted to be joined by guest presenter to talk to us about digital marketing, the next level. And we thought to build on our basics of digital marketing session, rather than having another theoretical session, we would actually introduce you to someone who not only talks the talk, but walks the walk. And we're delighted to be joined by Daniel Fesser, who's the MD of Wicked Witch Software. Now, Daniel is a producer of the wildly successful, and Wicked Witch is Catapult King, which has around 13 million players worldwide and has reached #1 in over 100 countries. And as if that weren't achievement enough, well, Wicked Witch has also developed product for some of the biggest brands in Australia and around the world on nearly every single software platform. So we're delighted to be joined by Daniel this morning. And without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Daniel, who's going to take over the screen, and he's going to talk you through digital marketing from the practical perspective. Hi, Daniel, and welcome.
Good morning, Collins. Good morning, everyone, wherever you might be in your home office or however you're surviving the lockdown. I'm here in my home office. That's why there's nothing very exciting on my back walls apart from one of our other desks, smiley cup over there. So Collins, thank you for your beautiful backdrop and very warm intro. You make us sound good. You can do all our intros from now on. I appreciate that. Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. I will try and keep an eye on the time. I have a horrible habit of thinking I have too little information and then talking too much and going over time. So Collins or anybody feel free to jump in with any questions or ask me along the way, or give me the hurry along as well. That is just fine. So I'm going to talk about digital marketing. It will be a little bit general, but it's obviously our background is in games and game development and marketing of video games on lots of platforms. So there's going to be a pretty strong video game bias going on. However, we do find that we do a fair bit of kind of traditional marketing, traditional media, and traditional digital media, as well as some game specific stuff. So for those who don't know, which was founded in 2001. I won't talk too much about this. There's a lovely picture there of all the ladies and gentlemen, probably from last Christmas or something like that, whenever we get it together to actually take a photo. We founded in 2001. I got started a little bit earlier that I'm not sure on the age demographic of our audience here, but just as a reminder, 2001, mobile phones were new. I'd just recently worked on one of the first CD-ROM games coming out of my previous job at that time. The Game Boy, the black and white Game Boy, was the leading handheld game platform at the time, and that's what we started developing on. And we were working on 386 and 486 computers back then. There wasn't really much about digital marketing back then. Google was fairly new at that time. I do remember around that time that somebody told me that if you click on one of the first searches in Google, that cost that advertiser 2 cents. I remember freaking out a little bit about that at the time. Going, 2 cents? What do you mean? 2 cents for a mouse click? And then I had the epiphany that Google was somewhat controlling the price of a mouse click. And it was 2 cents back then. That's what, nearly 20 years ago. We'll talk a little bit more about what the price of a mouse click is these days. I think it's substantially more than than 2 cents. And we will talk on some of the ways that they charged and implemented that. Some people may be familiar with DFP, double click for publishers, which was the first, or one of the first Google ad platforms, and they actually still use that today, and everything kind of sits on top still of double click for publishers and some various other things. In our studio, we do a lot of things. Whoa, have I just skipped to the back? Look at that. Here we go. Is my screen still shared?
No, it's not screen.
No, it's not.
We can see your wonderful bearded face.
Oh no. Well, we don't want to see that. Right. Are we back?
Screen's back.
Okay, cool. I don't know what I pressed there. One of those, some strange button on my keyboard. I'll attempt not to do that again. What was I saying? Yeah, so we do lots of things making video games. We design the games. We do all the programming. We are about a third of the studio is artists as well, 2D and 3D graphic artists. We have writers, designers, sound engineers, QA, quality assurance, testing, with a bit of marketing, admin, and of course some management as well. And you can see some pictures in the corner of all our ladies and gentlemen hard at work in an ocean of screens. Everyone has 2 or 3 screens on their desks, and probably about 3, 4, 5 computers if you include an Xbox, a PlayStation, a Nintendo, a PC, a Mac. Pretty well, you can see, and some toys to boot. So that's what we do. I'm going to attempt to go to next slide. Okay, some of the people we work with. So as Colin's mentioned, we work locally and abroad. We have a good relationship with Australian Rules Football. We've been doing AFL games on all those platforms for about 10 years. We work with Microsoft, Games Workshop, who do Warhammer and Dungeons and Dragons style fantasy games, the NRL, rugby union, lots of sports in Australia. And also we work with a bunch of outsourced companies internationally. And I will talk about, here's an example of the types of games that we do, or the variation in the games that we do. So some titles like Age of Empires is like a 20-year-old anniversary game that is on PC. It's a big brand. I'll touch on the way they market that game. It's substantially different to the way we do the smaller ones. In the middle is one of the sports titles. Again, the way they market that is quite different and use a lot more traditional media, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. And on the right-hand side, you can see one of our own original games that we design and fund ourselves, and we publish ourselves, and we market it ourselves almost exclusively digitally. I'll talk about these a little bit and how they're marketed. So Age of Empires was an interesting one. So it's a big game. It's been around for 20 years. It's very popular. It was headed by Microsoft, with a design team in Germany, with an art team in China, and with the programming and the developers in Australia. So it was a very global team. So the way they went about, and sophisticated knowledge of their audience and their KPIs, very detailed dashboards and control over the analytics that they were seeing, and the numbers that it was doing, and how many sessions were going. So it was definitely a big high-end operation. They had a marketing team of about 13 to 17 people, I think, are usually in the marketing calls. And I'll just summarize their approach by just saying that what they really did was they heavily used the gaming audience. So they found influencers and people who were fans of the game or leaders in the tournaments of the game, and they gave them early copies of the games, and allowed them to get familiar and to play, and kind of brought them into the fold as before the game was being released. They got their feedback, things they did and didn't like, and they actually pandered. Is that the right word to you? They took their feedback very, very seriously. So what some YouTuber who played the game, some professional game player or YouTuber, said about the game would actually trump a lot over Microsoft's own marketing. If they said they didn't like the look of something, regardless of the years of design work or whatever was put in it, it would most often get changed for that, because basically on launch, if a bunch of YouTubers love it or hate it, it's like reviews in other in other areas apart from video games, in other industries, the word I'm looking for, that can make or break the game. So they needed the first people off the bat to be enjoying the game and to fall in love with it. They also had an insiders program, Microsoft Insider program, so that had a closed beta and an open beta. So they actually put it out to, I think it was 2,000 people in the first month, 5,000 people in the second month, 10,000 people in the third month, and I think they got up to like 40 or 50,000 before release of these insiders that had early access to the game and were able to play it. That was part marketing and part beta testing in one. And when it came out, it had all the trimmings. It was at the E3, at the big trade shows. They flew all the professional gamers all around the world to talk about it and to do interviews. And so it was a big production of both traditional, primarily traditional media, actually. I guess the most digital aspect was really just the influencers and the Twitch channels and the kind of the streamers that were involved. It was less about advertising for like clicks and installs and more about reviews and presence and word of mouth. I'll move on. So the sports games, AFL and the NRL sports games, they have substantially less marketing going on. They largely market alongside the sports brand. So we work closely with the AFL and with their marketing team, and they will do things that are somewhat traditional, but in a digital sense. So they had a voting poll for who would be on the cover of the box, for example. That voting poll, I think, was one of the AFL's most popular posts and popular tweets throughout the year, because a lot of people are excited about the game. Look, and we see when the grand final happens, we see the game sales and the game sessions go right up, and when it's cricket season in Christmas, we see the game sales kind of fall, and the gameplay sessions fall as well. So these games very much move along with their physical brand and how they move. And so the digital side of that is really nothing much more than some AFL posts and tweets, a Facebook page that is managed, and we have our own Wicked Sports forum where we kind of focus on the technical side. We let the hardcore audience know about the features that are getting added, the bugs are being improved, and things like that. So that's a good example of traditional. Most of the sales, by the way, are 70% traditional, still selling the discs in JB Hi-Fi or EB Games, and about 30 to 35% of the sales are from online sales. That has grown substantially over the last 5 years. I think it was 10% digital sales about four or 5 years ago. It's now up to 35%. And I hear that in the US, it's about 50-50 to bricks and mortar sales versus digital sales for those games that are still made on an old-fashioned disc. Right, here is one of our own games, our first mobile game that we designed ourselves. We actually partnered with EA, Electronic Arts, with them, a mobile subsidiary of theirs called Chilingo, for the marketing of this game. Again, this was less about user acquisition and clicks, and it was more about reviews. We went to the E3 trade show in Los Angeles and just did, traditional camera interviews, and we had reviewers come with their clipboards and write down all the facts about the game, and and then I think they got about 15 or 16 reviews during game launch. It was very chart heavy, as in the focus was about getting the game to chart in the iTunes charts, because if you can get a game up into the top 10, it increases visibility, and when you appear on more pages and more searches, and the higher the rating, their algorithm's fairly sophisticated. Some people may be familiar with iTunes and the way their editorials and trending kind of games work. I should put a caveat in that it changes every year or two. You'll probably notice that the iTunes store is very different than it was 5 years ago, and every couple of years it changes substantially. We were lucky to be featured, and that was something that Chilingo helped us do, was get featured in the editorials, because a feature can make or break a game as well. For some perspective, there's about 900,000 games come out every year on mobile platforms. So that means that there's about 300 per day that come out, if my maths is correct. That means it takes you a year to make the game. So on the day of release, you need to get into the top 10, you need to have a quality that's going to cut through, 888,000 other games to make it into the top 10 or the top 50 for that particular week. So it's all about that visibility. The sales are very much all marketing efforts around launch. Traditionally they were anyway. It was all about the launch day. It was all about the first 3 or 4 weeks, a lot like a song chart where you're a hit and you're getting played on the radio and everyone's talking about it, and you're in the charts and you're seeing it everywhere. And then it's about the tail and how long that then goes for. In our case, in Catapult King, we were in #1 for about 2 weeks, nearly 3 weeks, I think. And we did probably about 80% of our lifetime sales in that first few weeks. We're lucky enough to have had a long tail on Catapult King, but look, that was all about reviews and YouTubes and charts, basically. And then there's just a few pictures of what goes into making the game, from concept through to the 3D modeling. For the record, this game was pretty well based on Angry Birds, by the way. We designed the game in a day because Angry Birds was so massively popular, we decided literally to make a 3D Angry Birds with knights and castles and dragons instead. So we followed a recipe of success, basically, which which we do, and I'll talk a bit more about that in one. So that was our first game where we partnered with Chilingo. This was probably our 3rd or 4th game, and I think it's a good comparison to draw, and I'll talk more about these 2 games, keeping an eye on the time, because the way they were marketed was very different. Puzzle Whiz, we did it entirely ourselves for a start, so we had to learn the hard way on what to do and what not to do, and I'm going to share some of those learnings and things that worked and some of the mistakes we made with you, and talk about the differences between this game and the others. Look, similar style. I think that's why I chose it as a comparison. So it's kind of a cutesy family styled game. We tried to skew it slightly female. We did have a female main character as well as a male main character, and cute pets, cute and colorful was kind of the way to go. Again, Candy Crush Saga was being massive, and Zelda, one of the Zelda games, and had a bit of a comeback. So that was the influence for this game, was kind of like Candy Crush meets the Legend of Zelda. So it was an adventure style game. Also cute and kind of funny, like Catapult King was. And you can see it's followed a very similar development process, similar team that worked on it, probably about 4 or 5 years later after Catapult King. So I'm going to quickly talk about how ads in games work for those who don't know. So most games these days, when Catapult King came out, about half the games were paid and half the games were free. When Puzzle Whiz came out, 97% of games were free and 3 were paid. So we made the game free because we didn't really have much choice. You start playing the game generally, and then before long, you will see an ad. These ads are sometimes at the end of a level, or sometimes when you first come into the game, or when you first leave. There's a few different types of ads. Interstitials, which is just one picture that comes up and shows you ad, and you try and find where the little X is and close it. Or video ads that you're probably familiar with as well, where you have to sit through for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds until you're able to close it. as you continue to play, you will tend to see more and more ads. And basically what happens is players get pushed into either watching and clicking on heaps of ads, or long-term players will start to experience different types of ads. Often rewarded videos, which you're probably familiar with, which is, you might have 100 gold coins in a game, and to get the next cool item, you need 150 gold coins. Well, I can either choose to play for another hour or so, or I could watch a 30-second video and get rewarded in-game currency. That's what we call in opt-in rewarded video ads. The more engaged players are, and the more they want to see the cooler stuff later in the game, the more videos they will consume, and then when they start getting sick of watching long videos, they'll start to actually part with their real money and start to buy the things directly. So ads are very much a way to monetize people playing for free. I'll talk a second about minnows, fish, dolphins, and whales, which is an analogy some of you might have heard before. Basically, minnows are the people who play games for free, never watch rewarded videos, and will never spend any money. They're kind of like the smallest fish, and the only real way to monetize them is to show them brief ads and hope to get a few cents along the way here and there over long-term play. Fish, kind of normal players, these are the people who watch more ads, play more often, and will watch some rewarded video, but most of the time don't really purchase. They might make $1 purchase or $2 purchase. If any of you have ever played Candy Crush for 6 or 12 months and eventually taken the plunge and spent that 99 cents, then you're what we call a fish as well. And if you can get a few dollars out of a fish, then that's great. Minnows usually make up about 70% of the audience, by the way. Fish are about 10 to 20%. And the remaining 5 or 10% are between dolphins and whales. Dolphins are the type of players who will consume lots of rewarded videos all the time, and they're happy to spend money right off the bat, and continue to spend money throughout the game. They'll typically will spend 10, 20, 50, 60, up to maybe $100 in-game items. Usually it's usually trends away from ads here at this point into actually starting to market the purchases themselves. And then whales, of course, just like the casino term of whales, these are your big spenders. These are the rich people that will spend $1,000, $2,000 in some. I know of some games. People spend up to $40,000 on their favorite game, at which point they get their own account manager and their own QA department. They get their name in the game and all these kind of things. They can actually start to heavily influence the game because they're such a massive fan, contributing so much money.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second, Daniel. Are you telling me that people are spending $40,000 on Candy Crush?
That's right, Candy Crush. Look, it's yeah. I am saying that. That's correct. It's mainly more the competitive games like Clash of Clans, slightly more hardcore audience that do it. But yeah, they spend $40,000 apparently. I've met some of the companies that have whale account managers, and yeah, they look after these. They look after these people.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
That's right. Good to clarify. That's unfortunately we haven't had any whales in our games as yet, but we'll make it happen one day. So I'm keeping an eye on time. I'm going to keep moving. I might skip over a bit of this. I mean, Catapult King was very basic when we first launched it. It basically only had interstitial ads that came up every time you started a level. One interstitial ad you would get. It also had an in-app purchase to remove ads. I think at the time it was $1.99, maybe it was $2.99 to remove ads. So 50% of our revenue came from the remove ads button. That was our primary way that we made revenue out of ads, was actually removing the ads. there were some problems because we were kind of working with Chillingo at the time, and we've since taken the game over, and we no longer publish it through EA Chillingo. We publish it ourselves now. But at the time, we had no control over the ad content, so there were problems with the types of ads that we're getting. It was a kids game, and occasionally we were getting like MA content or 15+ content was kind of coming through, and we got a few complaints about that. There was no real control at the time. It was primarily Google AdMob, as I was touching about before, were the primary ads. And we didn't really know what we were doing. We were just copying what all the other games did. You know, they would advertise something for Christmas, so we would advertise something for Christmas. They would make a specific ad for Xbox. We would make a specific ad for Xbox or Windows Phone. We then, after that, we did a thing called integrated ad aggregation. Now, some of you people might be familiar with this. I will talk about this for a second. It's fairly important. We started with just Google AdMob, and they served all our ads. What we found in some countries was we would request, you know, because it's getting played millions of times a day, so we might request 1 million ads in India, but there would only be actually 5% of those would get filled. Because we wouldn't get a very good fill rate, because basically there were no advertisers wanting to advertise for that demographic in India. So we had these fill problems. So we implemented ad aggregation. So there's a few ad aggregators that basically have multiple advertisers that feed into it. And kind of like eBay, they algorithm auto bids behind the scenes and you ask for an ad in India, it'll look through 7, 8, 10, 15 different advertising networks. It'll find an ad that matches the criteria, and then it will also pick the person who's going to pay the most for that ad to return the better one to you. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, and the way that those algorithms kind of change things. I will mention that it was time consuming. Each one of these ad suppliers does have to be managed. They have their own dashboards. They have to be invoiced separately, and you have to integrate their SDK into your game, or it will be the same for a website or any digital product. So there's a certain amount of time getting each one to work, and then you've got to get them all to play nice. And then what you find is you've got 15 different ad networks who are also upgrading the SDKs and changing things and deprecating features. So whilst it works and it increases fill substantially and it gives you a better rate, it was also a lot of work. Here's a few things we did just quickly. You know, we did the Facebook ads. We celebrated when we finally hit 10 million players. I think we're up to 30 or 40 million now. We actually started to lose count over the years with our analytics. And then we would continue to update the game and have new levels in it and things. And those are the things that other games did. As I mentioned before, when it was... we did a deal with Microsoft to put it on the Windows Store. We did a Halloween special, and we localized it also, I should add, into about 12 languages, including Chinese, because it became very popular in China and also in India. So there's some of the traditional things that we did. We then kind of relaunched it. We changed it. You can see at the top there, that was the old blue and green kind of graphics and banners and icons that the game had, and we went to a more vibrant red explosive and had more of a dynamic shot. What we actually found, the reason for doing that was so that you probably noticed that, so the app changes on your phone. One day you go, hey, it looks different. I might click on it again and start playing again. It also helped us get refeatured in the iTunes Store and in the Google Play Store because it was fresh and different and something new. So keeping the product fresh was pretty important. I'll skim over this, conscious of time. You know, we found it works on volume, just to give you some context. So and yeah, you've got to get used to the acronyms. I was about to use them right then. So CPI is, I think it's a cost per install. There's CPK, which is cost per 1,000 views. So at the time, we're getting across, it changes demographics. So across China, India, and the West in the US, we are averaging about 30 cents for CPK. So that means for every 1,000 ads we show, we get about 28 or 30 cents. That, you know, it's up to about a couple of dollars if you're in America and Australia for that matter. We can get up to a couple of dollars, but in China and India, where there's a lot more volume, it's much lower. It's more like 1 cent per 1,000 ads that you show, or something like that. So we show millions and millions and millions of ads, and you know, that translates into hundreds or thousands of dollars, basically. So it's all about volume in this space, anyway. Also, you know, so we tried a bunch of stuff. We tried just putting in twice as many ads, but what we found is players hated that, and they got sick of it, and they started to turn it off and not play. So we had to just kind of strike a balance. The other thing I'll mention is that there was so much data that we could look at. There was so much analytics. We tracked everything in analytics. We tracked pretty well every button you pressed, how long you played for, what level you got up to, how many times you tried that level, when you went to the purchase screen but didn't do that, and what time that was. And we could actually build some histograms and graphs of the tendencies that players made. So for example, if you went, we could see that you were going to the purchase screen 3 or 4 times but not doing anything about it. However, there was so much data that even when we had like 2 or 3 people, our data scientists, looking at it, there was we were overwhelmed, basically, and there were too many things to try. We're like, oh, let's try doing double ads. Let's try putting an ad here. Let's try this. Let's try that. And we found that it was very much a mud on wall technique. I'm going to talk about, so that was our experience with that game, putting ads in. I'm now going to talk about the other side, and that is advertising our game, our next game. In the same way we put ads in our games, and they advertise anything from, you know, t-shirts to political sponsor messages to other games. We also advertised our games in games. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we made those ads, and what we did and what we learned in my remaining time that I'm keeping an eye on. Notes are that ads are expensive. So to put into perspective, the other way around, about the cheapest ad we could get in the West was about 90 cents. The average ad was probably $2, $3, $4. That was for a CPI. That was for a click per install. So that's when you show an ad and somebody clicks on it and installs your game. That will cost you $3, $4. In some cases, it can get as expensive as $10 for that person to click and install your game. They may not play it after that, by the way. They may just throw it away or delete it straight away. They may have installed it just to get 100 coins in that other game, and then throw the game away, and you've just spent $4 on that. So think about when you're trying to do that in bulk, and some of you may have experience with large ad campaigns, but for us, it got real expensive real quick. If we wanted to test something and have a cohort of like 100 people or 200 people per day for 5 days, so we could see a trend, that would be 1,000 installs we would need of our game over 1 week, at, you know, at $4. It was costing us between $2,000 and $5,000 to try something per week, basically. We mainly tried YouTube, Facebook, social influencers, mainly on Instagram. We did traditional media and trade shows, as well as reviews and articles, and we paid for the ads in nearly all of those areas. What we found quickly is it was a world of different options, how to run different campaigns, how to get other companies that can advise you on campaigns to run, how to target, how to find your demographic, how to track it, how to put in analytics. And I could talk probably for another half an hour about that alone. I will touch on it a bit more here. I did want to give you a case example to kind of tie all this together into what we did and what we learned. So Puzzle Whiz, we hit it pretty hard. We'd learnt as much as we could. We're not experts, but we had dipped our toes in the water, and we'd seen it from both sides. So we started by, here's an example where you can see basically the same ad in 4 different formats. Obviously, you know, digital digital everything is technical, so it's very important to know your Facebook pixel sizes, to make sure you are running in if you're running in 4K Ultra HD. Make sure if it's mobile friendly, if it's aspect ratio correct, all that kind of stuff. So we would find if we made one ad, there would probably be about 20 or 30 versions of it to then push it out to all the different platforms. And there's an example of a few of them there. And the same goes for videos and screenshots. I don't have time to play the videos. You can go and look at them in your own time if you want. But they did have a trailer video and screenshots as well. And they have about 30 or 40 of those, all in multiple languages for different stores. So there's hundreds and hundreds of those as well. So this is where it starts to get interesting. So and where we learned the most. So you might be familiar with a thing called A/B testing, and that is really important. Basically, it means you put one ad out and you see how it goes, and then you put another ad out and you compare. Often you can do them both at the same time and get some real-time feedback. So when we launched PuzzleWiz, Google actually support you doing this, and they help you. They want you to do this. So we actually launched the game with 3 separate store pages, and you can control the percentage. So basically, at random, if you went and clicked on PuzzleWiz or searched PuzzleWiz and went to the store, you had a 33% chance, and you can weight them differently. And we started with just 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. You would get one of these different store pages. So we came up with 3 kind of motifs, if you like, or 3 themes. There was the kind of the classic theme. There was the colorful and inquisitive, puzzly theme. And then there was a traditional adventure, role-playing, story-based theme on the right, you can see there. Now, when we did that, of those 3 themes, we also did 3 variations of each. You can see... So for example, of the classic theme, we would do three versions of the... inquisitive theme. We would do 3 versions. Some had the character, some didn't have the character, some had screenshots down the bottom, some didn't have screenshots down the bottom, some had, like, bling and pets and things like that. Others had a setting. So we would then do different versions of each of those, and we would test them. Every week we would put them out, and we would see who clicked on what. It was a big exercise. We went a bit overboard in a way, but we really wanted to learn and understand. Here you can see how different they ended up kind of getting in the end. Some were some kind of... We started looking to the psyche of our players, analyzing who our players were. Were our players, people who liked stories? Were our characters people who liked Disney and like cute characters? Or were our players actually Candy Crush players who wanted a puzzle element? Were our players, people who like to gamble or have that gambling element with, loot boxes and picking prizes? And here you can see a bunch of different things that we tried. Everything from were they social players? It was another thing, how to play with your friends with the Facebook icon there. So we tried all of these things over a period of about 6 months. This was all before launch, by the way. This was getting ready, spending that few $1,000s each time, getting ready to kind of nail our demographic. So what did we learn from all of this research and all of these tests and spending all of this money? What we learned was out of the category of like 12, 15 different ads that we narrowed it down to, on the creative side, the best ad was 20 times more efficient than the worst ad. It was a massive ratio. That meant when we spent, $2 for 1,000 views of our ad, 20 times more, 20 people would click on the best one, but only 1 person would click on the worst one. So there was a massive difference just in the creative. Nothing had changed. The game wasn't different. Nothing was different, but just basically that poster or that ad and how we drew it was different. So targeting was the next thing that we learned that was massively important. Obviously, they're pretty sophisticated on the phones and Facebook these days. You've probably seen it, male, female, countries, what interests you like. What we found is we could get really specific with interests. So we could target people who had played Candy Crush. So we could only advertise to a Facebook user that we knew had played Candy Crush or had played Zelda or any other thing that we could find. We could also then make sure that they were female. We could make sure that they were, over 30 years old. We could make sure that they were in America or in a high socioeconomic area where they're happy to spend more money, and we could return a lot. The golden, the holy grail, rather, of this, by the way, as you're probably familiar with this, is to reach what we call the money crank. So if we can spend 90 cents on an ad or $2 on an ad, but on average, when a player plays that game, on average, that player spends $2.20. That means that you're ROI positive, and every $2 that you spend, you're making $2.20. And then in theory, you can just go to the bank and borrow $1 million and dump all that on advertising and make, and make $100,000 per million that you spend. And that's what these games do. That's what these big games do. That's why Candy Crush can just afford to sink millions and millions in every day, because they know, on average, with the number of players they get, they will be ROI positive from that kind of campaign. So that was the goal. That was the holy grail. That was what we were trying to reach to. And I'll tell you how close we got and how we didn't quite make it. And maybe that'll help you in your own digital marketing thing. As I'm attempting to wrap this up, I've only got a couple more slides, but this was the most important lesson. So what we found is, for our game, out of advertising everywhere, all those ones I listed, Facebook was the best for us, better than YouTube. It was better than advertising in games. Facebook had the best options and was the cheapest. So we got it down to getting it to about 90 cents USD for an American or Western player. And when we would do a campaign of spending $2,000, getting 4,000 ads, sometimes we would make an average of 92 or 95 cents back, sometimes even $1.10 back on our 90 cents. So at that point, we were celebrating, saying, right, we've finally done it. All this research, all our targeting, it's all paying off. We know our audience, and here we go. Let's go to the bank and just start going crazy. We were a little bit worried, though, because sometimes we would run that campaign, the exact same ad campaign, mind you, and we would spend 90 cents per user or per group of ads, and we would only get 35 cents on average back. Again, our cohorts were small, and we were only spending a few $1,000s a week because that's all we could afford. And what we found is it comes back to that whales and minnows things. If we happen to have somebody in that 1,000 players that dropped $20 on the game because they really liked it, then our average went massively up. And next week, if we did the same campaign, but we didn't happen to get those couple of people who dropped $20 on our game, well, then the average went right down. So we weren't quite sure where we were at, but we were feeling pretty confident. So we went to the bank, as it were, and decided to do on launch to do our big user acquisition and marketing campaign. So what hit us that we didn't expect was a thing called scaling. So we had spent so much time refining our ads and targeting and trying to get to this ROI positive position. What we didn't realize is that we had actually narrowed our audience worldwide down so much that there wasn't many of them. Right. So what I'm saying is, if it was, middle-aged females that had disposable income who liked Candy Crush and played netball every second Sunday with brown hair that was curly, then we found that they would spend some more money. And when we went to, spend, tens of thousands of dollars and kind of scale it up by a factor of 10 or 20, well, guess what? There wasn't that many middle-aged women with brown curly hair playing netball on the weekends, playing Candy Crush, ready to play our game. And we got in trouble. That means that the ads we're no longer targeting to those people. So we either A, couldn't spend the money, or we would widen our search, make it less generic to spend the money, but then we were falling outside our demographic. So that was really the big lesson that we learned, that the size of our cohorts and the research we did was misleading when we brought it to scale. We tried heaps of things. I won't bore you with the details on all the different things we tried and iterated, and the data that we combed through, and the conclusions that we came to. But in the end, during this time, I should add, about a year or so of doing this, that 90 cents had gone to about $1.50 as well. The game was still only making the same amount of money it was making, but the cost of advertising had actually increased that much. And I remember every trade show I went to, it would be like 20 cents a user, 50 cents a user, $1 a user, $2 a user, $5 a user. The Clash of Clans, like you asked about earlier, Collins, that has a lot of whales and a lot of hardcore people playing. They know that they can spend up to $12 per user or per ad group or campaign, because they know on average that player is, their average player, is going to spend $13, $14, $15. So they can actually spend. So that then drives the price of ads up everywhere. If you're advertising to that same demographic that Clash of Clans is advertising to, well, the ad mediation company is not going to choose your ad where you're only paying $5. They're going to keep on serving the $12 ads out. And that kind of pushed us out in the end. We found that volume and whatever kind of pushed it out. So we kind of got it right. We kind of learnt it and we kind of did it. But then when it came time to play with the big boys, we realized that we were outgunned, as it were. So what are we going to do next? Our strategy next is we're going to release earlier and iterate more quickly and learn faster. We waited a long time until we started last time. Reserve a decent budget for cohorts. So that's the other thing. Just spend more money on it. We tried to do it on a shoestring. It felt expensive to us. We're still spending, up to $100,000 to learn, but it's not enough. Scaling, as I mentioned, that was the big lesson, and that's a big next challenge, is addressing scaling. And in hindsight, we will try that with our earlier tests. While targeting is great, you've got to remember that you can't target too fine. And also which analytics, we learned which analytics meant things and which analytics didn't, which analytics were misleading and kind of red herrings that laid in the data, what was just noise in the data and what was a real trend and what was a perceived trend. And so, yeah, learning which analytics to stick to. I've gone pretty massively over time. I thought I didn't have enough to talk about, and I've skipped over a heap of it, but that's it. I don't know if anyone's asking questions along the way. I didn't hear any.
Well, look, it's been fascinating, Daniel. It really has, and I think, as you rightly pointed out, we could be talking about this for the next hour,
Yes.
and longer, because it's really interesting. Your world is obviously a very unique one. It's quite different from some of the other people who would be on this call, but the fundamentals are the same. And
Right.
I think there are a few things that, and I've made some rather cryptic notes, but for me, a couple of things really stood out. ROI, I think, is essential. And certainly conversations that I've had with people and some of the questions that have come through are all around, well, how much should I spend, and how do I know whether I'm actually achieving anything? And I think you hit the nail on the head by absolutely knowing your analytics. You have to know what you've spent and what it is that spend brought you, because it's not enough to just throw money at it, because you can be flinging money left, right, and center.
That's right. It can become a real guessing game. And I didn't talk about critical mass becomes a big part of that as well, Collins. Like, a lot of people will spend, $50,000 and they're happy to make 25,000 back, and that will trigger the next spend. So that's negative ROI. But the idea is that they will build up to critical mass. They'll then spend $100,000 and get 60,000 back. They'll then spend 200,000 and get 75% back, and that because word of mouth. They start to chart more. They start to get more organic impressions. People share it more, and they're kind of building up to this like larger end goal. So it can be deceiving he can be seeing when ROI, you know, is real or not.
Absolutely. And, you know, having dabbled a little bit myself for GTPA at the moment, we're sort of looking at digital campaigns. And again, another question that sort of came up is, well, how much should I spend? And the reality is, well, how much do you have?
Yeah, the more the better. The more the better, unfortunately. Seems to be the way.
Just to do something really basic and really simple, you have to have a lot of volume of advertising out there. And maybe you're going to hit the right person, certainly when you're first starting out.
I think our minimum was, like I said, 200 people a day for 7 days at a bare minimum. And there's a lot of noise in that data, but you know,
absolutely.
that's a few grand to try.
Yeah. And that's a lot of money to try on something that may not work.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing that I picked up from what you had to say, and you've got the advantage in that what you guys do is already creative. So to come up with the collateral, to come up with the creative side of it, you could do that all in-house. But if you don't have the right creative, you are pretty dead.
Yeah, that's right. Making videos is expensive. That's right. Iterating on... and just agreeing with the people who are doing your creative, sharing the vision and communicating about that and all the challenges that come with that to start with.
And understanding the medium that you're advertising in. You know, I think when we were looking at the more traditional advertising mediums and we were doing print ads and you know, things of that nature, it was a lot easier to kind of get a measure of where you were going, because you could page through the magazine you were advertising in and you could say, oh, okay, well, ads of that kind are featured in this, therefore these readers must be looking at that, or in the newspapers or whatever. Or radio ads, you could say, well, everyone listening to this radio station clearly likes this sort of advertising content. But online, there's so much of it that you can't get a measure. You can't say, well, look, I'm going to be on Facebook for a week and kind of look at what's advertised, and that will give me an idea of what it is that people are going to click on, because it doesn't work that way.
And it'll change. It'll be different the next week.
Absolutely. Well. So, you know,
but then when you finally get it right after 6 months, Facebook will change their algorithm, or something will fundamentally change, and all your ads need to be widescreen now, or whatever.
And that, I guess, is the final thing, the algorithm. You can't cheat the algorithm.
Not really.
The algorithm is a lot smarter.
And if you do, it'll fix itself up pretty quick.
Yes. So you might be able to get away with it for a really short time, and then it's all going to change anyway. So you've got to get the mix right. You've got to spend the right amount of money. You've got to know how much you're spending to make the money. So you have to know exactly what your ROI is, because you might be thinking that you're doing pretty well. And then when you actually start running the numbers, you find out you're in the hole much deeper than you could possibly imagine.
It really is a science at the end of it. The amount of information and interpreting that information is a fine art and a slowly acquired skill, I think.
Absolutely. So, Daniel, if you could leave people with one sage bit of advice, particularly newbies that are entering into this digital marketing thing for the first time and who've decided that it's probably going to be a lot cheaper than the traditional marketing, and then discover that actually it's not. But if you could leave all of us with one piece of sage advice, what would that be?
That's a good question. There's a lot. I would probably say test early and test often, I think would be my go-to. I think that's the overarching lesson that we've learned is, you know, forget what you know and go by the numbers by continuing to test that out and see. It's going to cost you a bit, but it's better than, you know, putting all your eggs in one basket and hoping that was right at the end.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Daniel. It's been
welcome.
Fascinating. And, you know, if anyone has any questions, by all means, send me an email. You've got my email address on the screen there. And obviously not just about digital marketing. And if there are any specific questions around today's session, fling them to me and I'll send them back to Daniel, and we'll get you some answers.
More about it. Sure.
But anything else around that international trade space, GTPA is always there to help. irrespective of what it is, particularly in what we keep being told are unprecedented times.
Yes.
They might be unprecedented,
Yeah.
but they're still pretty much business as usual in terms of trying to earn a living.
And in
So,
the digital space, you know, we're lucky to we're lucky. Just remember how lucky we are to be in that space, to be operating there. You know.
absolutely. And technology in many ways has made the world a lot smaller, which means we all have far more access to things that we had before this. So thank you very much, Daniel.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
all for your attention today. And we look forward to your company again next week. Same time, same place. Thanks, everyone. Have a
Thanks,
good day.
Collins. Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.